to be with you today. My name is Julia Kelleher, and I'm with First Aid Educate, First Aid Action Fund. I feel so lucky to spend this time with you this morning, and it's so encouraging and so motivating for me to see that on a Wednesday morning that there were actually 50 people that signed up, so hopefully everyone will be able to make it, but that there's 18 people here this morning really showing a commitment and a concern for what's happening in public education in Delaware and really choosing to be a part of the solution. So I want to start by thanking you. I know everyone's very busy, and it's hard to find time to do everything, but the fact that you're here today and want to learn more, and I hope when we open it up for discussion that you'll share your thoughts and your ideas, because we equally want to learn from you, so that we can do something so that every child in Delaware has a real opportunity to realize their potential and to achieve great things, which would not only be great for them as individuals, their families, but our community and our state. Okay. So the format of this presentation, I'm not sure if you've experienced Mentimeter before, but that's what we're going to use because we wanted to promote engagement so that this doesn't feel like one person is sort of speaking at the group for the entirety of the session. As questions come up, you can put them in the Q&A, and Danielle will interrupt me, which is totally fine. I'd rather have the question come up so that, again, in the moment that we're discussing the topic, that it feels, appropriate for you to get clarification or you want to add something. Please feel free. I'm absolutely happy to have that engagement, and I don't see it as an interruption. So on your screen now, you'll see a QR code. You should be able to, with your phone, take a picture of that, and it'll take you to the Mentimeter presentation. So you're going to be able to see on your phone exactly what I'm presenting on your computer screen. Some help. Oh, great. Okay, thank you for that. Whoever did the thumbs up, that's really helpful because I can't see anyone, and getting feedback, it's super helpful. So that it's working, that makes me feel really, really happy. Great. Okay. So, okay, we have 11 out of 20 that have been able to do it, which is great. And now perfect. I'm gonna move on so we get an experience of how this works. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? First, I'll introduce you to FSE and FSA, two organizations that have been around for about 4.5 years now and really committed to changing outcomes in Delaware. We're going to look at the education landscape in Delaware, which involves data, how it's designed, and the money that flows through it. Legislation, obviously, which is a piece that shapes or puts guardrails around the system. And then take a look at where we are in terms of academic outcomes. Once we move past that, the real purpose of today's conversation is to figure out what are the levers for change, right? And what's possible? What can we do? How collective action will help us force a system that, by nature of its design, right? It's a government system. It's not designed to be dynamic by nature, right? There's a little bit of resistance to change, which is just inherent. It's not that doesn't mean anyone's responsible for that or it's anyone's fault. It's just how government works. And so what can we do? What are those levers we can pull on? And then I'm going to talk a bit about the school board elections, which are on May 14th. And then the opportunities that we have. There's 10 specific things that you can do to activate those levers, and then hopefully collectively we can move forward to see something that's different in the next school year, which I entirely think is possible. Okay, so First Aid Educate. First Aid Educate is a C3. It's a charitable organization, and our mission is to catalyze radical change, right? To do exactly what we're doing today, which might not feel radical, but the idea of people coming together and saying, we're going to be the change that we want to see. We are going to be mobilized. We are going to activate ourselves and activate those in our communities, because what we really want is for every child in Delaware to get an education that allows them to lead a productive, fulfilling life. Whatever that may be, whether they want to go to college, they want to go to a trade school, they want to start their own business, whatever they want to do, that they're equipped, that the public school system equips them with everything they need to navigate what we all as adults know is an extremely challenging experience to try to establish a career and have upward mobility. we're complemented that we have a sister organization, and the sister organization is the C4, which is more of an advocacy organization. And so this organization focuses more on making sure that every community in Delaware has a school board, elected leadership, right? Public officers who are responsive to their needs, who are accountable for those outcomes that the districts are producing. And that as a result of that political with a small p action, that children as a result are given environments in schools that allow them to thrive. So this drives the outer ring of what's happening in a school that is just, good work, right? Good social work that we want to educate. We want an educated citizenry. We want children to have opportunities to grow and learn and thrive. But outside of that, there are political actors, because it's the nature of government, and we need to make sure that the right people are in the right seats and that those voices are representative and that they're producing the kinds of policies and expectations for the system that ensure the C3 can realize what it wants, which is what we all want, for every child to get a high quality public education that prepares them to be successful. So there are two different organizations. The C3 is charitable and the C4 is social welfare. Contributions to the C4 are considered political. The C3, the First Aid Educate, is what you would traditionally understand. They work together, and this is, the design is intentional, and it's part of more of a national movement where nonprofits and people who want to see real social change are understanding that the dynamic requires the C3 to be paired with the C4 to actually be able to create that momentum and enough to push it over the tipping point to get the kinds of changes that we want. So we're pushing from all sides. Okay, so first question for the group on your phone, it should be up. Could you use the thumbs up to let me know that we're all okay so far, please? Great, thank you. Okay, so you should have a sliding scale for each of these four. Hi, Tanya. Danielle? There we go. Okay. Danielle, Tanya has her hand up, so not sure
Oh, let me see.
what to do about that.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A or the chat area.
Okay, so we've got 8 participants so far. If we could get everyone to vote, that would be fantastic. Might not be possible, but we have 8 so far. Perfect, thanks. And there's 23 people on the phone. And again, remember, the point here, right, is to provide a collective experience for all of us so that we're able to work together. So this kind of participation is really helping us form a group to know where are we? What's our starting point as a collective in understanding what's really needed? So this engagement and the responsiveness really helps us be able to do that. Without it, we might not really have a good understanding of our starting point.
Hey, Julia, can we pull back up the QR code for some?
Sure, but they can also go to this, if you go to Menti up at the top, if you go to menti.com and they'll ask you to enter in a code, it's this 867300, but I'll definitely go back. Okay. So back to our answers. So what is it that's really, what do we think? And it's interesting, right? Like, I think the group is saying it's probably a little bit of all of this, right? Is funding adequate? We're above 3, so more people are saying probably not. Are the policies working? Same sort of score. Political interest, which is a little bit less. And then some people are saying all of the above, right? And really, in our opinion, it is all of the above. This is a systems issue, and it's a multifaceted problem. So we're not going to find just one solution. We're not going to find one strategy that's going to address all of the things that need to be modified in order for the public school system to do what we wanted to do for children. And that's why FSE and FSA adopts this synergistic approach. So we want to educate and mobilize. Part of that is what we're doing today to raise awareness, to engage people. There's grass tops and grassroots, because just like the participants in this webinar today, you have some people who are community members and some people who are in positions to be able to do the grass tops mobilization. We need to look at legislation and policies. So what's happening in Dover and what's happening in every school district across the state. We want to find what's successful. We want to find innovation. There are great things. One thing that I really hope that you leave today with is an appreciation that our position is that teachers are doing everything they can with what they have. That the conditions of teaching and learning don't always allow teachers or educators to do everything that they want to do for a child. And some children come with needs that exceed what the system is able to give them in the moment. And so what we want to do is find innovation. There are people who are being incredibly successful educating students. So it can't be all bad, and we've got to find what's good and then try to replicate that. But then we also need to have people know really what's going on and what kind of outcomes we're getting. So the ideal end state, students are proficient, right? They're performing well. There's high levels of proficiency, and high levels doesn't have to be 100%, but it's definitely got to be moving in that direction towards the top quartile. That all of our initiatives, federal, state, and local, are aligned. Because if not, then you're channeling funds to different places instead of using them as synergistic resources to be able to amplify what you're going to be able to do and work more efficiently and more effectively.
Hey,
That there's
Julie,
enough money going into the system and that it's distributed equitably, and that every stakeholder is engaged, that this isn't something, education in Delaware isn't something that happens at the hand of someone else, that all of us own this sort of civic responsibility of being involved in this dialogue and improving the process, because these children will grow up and they will be the next leaders in our state, and we've got to make sure that they're prepared to do that.
I'm
There
gonna
should be
jump in
indicators
and
of what's
interrupt
going
really
on.
quick. We did have
Uh-huh.
a couple more people ask for the Menti code. I
Uh-huh.
just want to address everyone, if you just type into Google menti.com, it'll come up, but we can go back to the QR code and we can keep it up for a few seconds for everyone to scan that's joining a little bit later.
Okay. So to continue, what we want is for all of the parts of the system to work well, and we want, as a public, to have ongoing indicators, not just summative outcomes, not just end of the road, kind of where did we land. We need, just like you would do anything in your home, in your business, with your child, you look for ongoing indicators in a relationship of how things are working. And that's the same thing we want to see the system provide. And the idea would be that every parent who sends their child to a public school in Delaware expects something wonderful. And that's really important. That's important for all the people who live in Delaware right now, but it's also important for the business community who's trying to expand business and bring new families in. If families won't relocate to Delaware because the public school system is not providing an adequate education for their child, that has implications for the economic development of the state and all of our well-being. The picture on the right, just as a side note, it was an initiative that FSE sponsored last year. It was the first spelling bee, and we did it in coordination with Parks and Rec and the United Way, and we're going to spearhead this in the next school year to have countywide spelling bees and then one statewide spelling bee. And here's why this is an example of, it's a real tangible example of what the change we want to see. Those children who participated, there were 40, they chose to learn these words all on their own. And a bunch of students, older students, like these were grades 4 to 6, there were high school students lined up on the benches in the gym. Like we can create interest and engagement in education by driving intrinsic motivation for children to want to do well and creating conditions that honor that and that recognize that and that encourage that. So we're really excited. So stay tuned for what's coming with that next year. Okay, so the education landscape. A couple more questions now. So hopefully everybody has what they need with the QR code. So the statistic, there's 142,000 more or less children who attend public schools in Delaware. There are 15 regular public school districts and 3 vocational. They operate very differently. The leadership is different and the kinds of programs that they offer is different. There are 196 public schools, traditional public schools, and then there are 23 charter schools. And you can see why I put this graphic here on the right. Not every child in Delaware has access to a charter school. most students in Newcastle County can find one to attend if they have capacity. But as you move down in the state, you can see that there's less access, and that has implications for school choice, right? Do parents get to pick where they want to send their child, and do children have more than one option in terms of where they want to get their education? And somebody gave me an interesting, I'll just, as an aside, they told me an interesting anecdote. They likened picking a school to picking a supermarket. So imagine, like, how many times do you go to a different supermarket? You don't always just go to the supermarket in your neighborhood, because maybe the supermarket where you live only has certain things, and you want to go to Whole Foods that isn't right there because you want, I don't know, a baguette. The idea of allowing options for parents to pick is really about that. It's a public service, and citizens should have the right to pick the best option for themselves. And you can see that, at least just in this one line item of charters, we don't have equal access across the state for all students. So how does the money come into the system? The federal government gives all states money. The state of Delaware and every other state basically acts as a pass-through, meaning they receive the money and 95% of it gets pushed out to the districts. The state Department of Education really doesn't have a huge budget. In Delaware, they put in about $3.5 billion. So that includes a lot of student funding, and then some of that stays for operations at the DOE. And then the local share, which is through property assessments, they raise about 33% of the income. And then that federal funding on the top is about 10%. So all of this coming in from the top is about 10% of the overall state budget. More or less in states, it ranges from like 8 to 15. The number that Delaware has is reasonable. It's within, you know, the right range. It's not, they're not underutilizing it or overutilizing it. Okay, so more about funding. Question for you. How much do you think, so I gave you the number that the state gave, right? 3.5 billion this year, plus the 10% from the feds. And then there's local money. How much do you think Delaware allocates for each student? How much do we pay? Okay, so we've got 16, that's great. Okay, 17. Let's just try to get to 20 if we can. It's like 3 more people. No? Okay. Well, the right answer, there are 2. It's between 15 and 17, but in some instances it's 30,000 or more. And the case in point for that one is Warner Elementary. There are several, but Warner Elementary, the average per pupil allocation is, or expense, I should say, is nearly double of what it is in the schools. And Warner traditionally, which again, great school because they've got wonderful children that attend there, and they've got great educators who wouldn't show up there if they didn't want to be doing what they're doing. So it's a great school, but it's historically struggled to meet proficiency standards. Yet they're getting twice as much. And that's just one instance. There are many of these examples across the state. And so to say again, there's nothing disparaging in what I'm saying about Warner. Those resources may be necessary to be able to do something, but the idea that we're not getting better returns on that, I think, is the takeaway. Okay, so where's Delaware rank in the nation? So you can see Delaware's in section B here. We're 2 from the bottom, right above Rhode Island. This data is from 2020. So, and these numbers don't come out regularly, so it takes time to get these national reports. But they're at 17,034. Okay, so 17,000. And we're in the top, you know, quarter of the states. So if we look at the national average at $15,000, Delaware is at 17, which is above it, and Massachusetts is spending nearly the same, but yet in terms of achievement, they're ranked number 1 in the nation. Now, it's an entirely different system. You've got to consider scale and all of that because it's a bigger system with different, you know, the financials and the people are different. It's not the same environment, but it's a good point of comparison. And then down the bottom on the left, you can see that's that distribution where I was showing you that the majority of the funds coming in There's the state funds 10% that are feds, and then the 33% that'll be the local revenue. So does every school and district in Delaware receive the same amount of funds? Awesome, great job. So no, they don't. And here's a picture that explains that. All right, so what are we looking at? You can see, but from top to bottom, who's spending the most? You've got Christina at the top. These are averages with $25,000. And you've got Lake Forest down the bottom at 15, which is a little bit under what that national average was. And the reason why these numbers don't match is because these are state generated numbers that have different inputs than what the national report did, and could probably be, a little bit more, there's probably, there is refinement in terms of the input and the data that went into calculating these. The other thing that you notice is different is the size of the green bar, which is the local share, that 33%. And all of this is baseline information that's very important to know, because there's a big conversation in Delaware around changing the funding formula. So how does Delaware allocate funds, which is the funding formula? Great. So you came into this presentation, with a great baseline knowledge. We do it through a unit count, which is like, this is just a sort of the most basic illustration. For every 10 children, you get $1,000. Another 10, you get $1,000. Delaware has 3 levels of units: Division 1, Division 2, and Division 3, and there's different rules for allocating those. Most recently, with the lawsuit that was passed and an initiative from the government, they're putting equity funding and opportunity funding in, which are intended to offset resource gaps. So children that might need more resources, like a special education child or a English language learner, receive additional funds from the state that goes to the district, and then they're used to provide that additional programming. And this is the news, if you haven't seen it, on the proposed changes to Delaware's funding formula. Delaware is one of the few states that remain where they're using that unit based. Most other states have gone to a weighted student formula, which means that they look at the demographic or the profile of the student, and then they give a weight. So an average student in Delaware is a 1. And then if it's a student, and I'm making up the percentages, but just for illustrative purposes. So, but if I'm a special ed student, I'm going to get 1.25% of the allocation. And if I'm a special ed student and I'm also ELL, I'm going to get 1.5, 0.25 for being special ed and 0.25 for being ELL. And so my allocation is going to be 1.5. And so there's this whole formula, and you can look at it. It's up here on the right. If you want to go to the Delaware Department of Education, the report is there. And there's also a lot of stories. Rodell has done a lot of work leading these conversations. Let me stop there. Any questions so far? Okay, I'm thinking no. So, do you track education legislation in Dover? Yay, whoever's that one. This is fascinating. I'm so happy for you guys to be here with me again today, this morning, and for sharing this and allowing me to know more. Hopefully when we'll turn off the camera and I'll get to see you too. Turn on the cameras and I'll get to see you and hear your thoughts. But this is great. And this is what we need. We need a diverse group of stakeholders who are committed. So it doesn't matter that everyone's looking at it. It matters that one of us in the group is looking at it. So I'm going to share with you, here's some legislation that's been introduced between January and April. And if you could just take a moment, because there's the next question, the next slide has a question about what's on here. So I just want to give you a moment to be able to read that. So just quickly, we've got modernizing IT on the left, training for school board members. We've got salary adjustment, teacher academy pathways, grant salary schedule credit for graduate degrees. And we've got something on student meals, something on borrowing money, like FAFSA and stuff like that. Reimbursement. This is actually important. This is very important, actually, that the education can get more resources in because they can charge another agency for special education services. Employment practices in healthcare facilities, introduction of the javelin, sexual assault prevention training, and mandates for phased in unit funding for athletics. So, question. Legislation proposed in the 2024 session, what I just had up there, reflects sufficient focus on student achievement. Great. So I think the takeaway here is not, let me say it positively. The takeaway here is if we want to see more legislation that's focused on student outcomes, then we need to write to our legislators. Because if that table doesn't reflect what we think should be there, the constituents, the stakeholders, the citizens are who lets the elected official know, this is my voice, this is my desire, this is what I'd like to see you work on, it's important to me. And then that table starts to reflect the interests of the people. So in no way am I suggesting that someone in Dover isn't doing their job, because I'm not. I'm saying it's a collective effort. And so if we're not seeing what we want to see, then we've got to figure out what to do to make sure that people know what we want to see and work together to achieve that. And when I say work together, again, the 501c4 that we have is a small p. Work together means independent of party. Work together means find consensus. Work together means figure out how to come to the middle, because the goal is to provide something that's good for families, good for students, and good for educators. Okay, so our outcomes. Next question. How many Delaware students on average can read at grade level? I think my test questions are terrible because everybody knows the answers already. And whoever these 15 people are, there are 16 people that are consistently voting, I am so grateful to you. But yes, the answer is 40%. Now, how many can do math on grade level? You know, and don't you wish it was 85? I mean, when you think about what that means, it's sad to report that, yeah, you're right, it's 30%. But we really wish it was 85. And if that is a true feeling, then it should serve to motivate us to be able to do something today, tomorrow, the next day to try to change that. And we can't all solve all the problems, but we also can't just let it pass us by. We can't accept it, and we can't say it's okay, because we know in our hearts that it's really not. So there's the Delaware report card. The website's down here on the bottom. And this is that you can get, it's great stats. It's great stats. Is it everything that it could be? No, but we could always ask for other things that we wanted to see. You see the enrollment number on the left, and in the middle, you see those stats, right? 40%, 30%. You've got the graduation rate on the left. Attendance in this bottom right is a huge problem. It's a huge problem nationally. Just post-COVID, it's exacerbating the learning loss that happened as a result of students not being able to go to school for that period. So if you want to check out that website, that's great. This is what the state produces at the end of, at the beginning of every year when the assessment results come back. It's like late August, early September. And so what you see here, right, if you look at the blue columns is 19. Which direction are we going across every grade and in both subject areas? Generally, we're going down. Now, mind you, COVID happened, right? So there's a piece of this that is a national phenomenon. What's important is where we go from here, but what are we going to do something different, or to at least deal with the reality now that we had COVID and we need an intervention that responds directly to that learning loss. The other thing of interest here when you see these slides is, if you look at the third grader in 19, this 51% on the far left, 19, 20, 21, and I don't have it for 22 because that kid in 19 would have been in 6th grade in 22. I don't have, I'm sorry, I would have been, wait, 19, this is 19, 20, 21, 22, right? So it's the gray, right? So the 51, the bar, the blue bar with 51 becomes 38 3 years later. So that's a concern, right? It's not so much even where we are point in time, it's what's the trajectory, and we're clearly going down, but there were more children who were performing on grade level, and now there are fewer. But neither one of these images to me is what we need. We don't need this kind of chart that gives us a 40% value or these kinds of graphs. What we need to look at are human beings. And so if you're in the supermarket next time and you see, and families are out shopping, and the next time you see children and you went to count, you counted up to 10. Once you got to 4, every other child you come across can't do the reading on grade level. And once you get to 3, every other child can't do the math. And it's worse when we look at subgroups, because by ethnicity for African-American students, instead of being 4 out of 10, it's 2.5, which I don't think you can really get a half of a child. So let's just say it's 2. It's 2 out of every 10. Hispanics are doing a little bit better in math. They're both doing worse Hispanics are doing better in ELA. Both subgroups are doing worse in math. And the Asian students seem to outperform the average. Same problem when you look at special categories of kids. These are the children who would be getting that weighted formula, who are receiving the opportunity funding now. ELL students, 1.6. So instead of being 4 out of 10, it's 1.6 out of 10. And then a lot of students fall into 2 categories. So not only are they ELL, they're special income, or they're low income, or they're special needs. So when we look at the human face of this, to me, it's concerning, it's disturbing. These are lives. These are children. If they don't get the education that they need, the whole rest of their life will be affected. So what percent of, last question on the outcomes, I think, what percentage of Delaware schools report total proficiency for the whole school, right? This one was for individual groups and subsets of kids.
Hey, Julia, I'm gonna interrupt. Do you mind if we go back to the math and proficiency slide?
This one? Or this one?
Janine, if you could put your hand up for which slide? Different one.
This one? Please go back to math, and not that one, not this one. This one?
Also, okay. Yeah, the one you were just on.
This one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Also, everyone's slides will be shared at the end of the webinar, as well as a recording of the webinar. So if anything's going too fast for you, if you want to review a slide later on, you'll be able to when we send them out. I think we're
Is there a
good to
question on this one? So no question, just to see it. Okay, so let's go back to. So now we're looking at schools. And remember, there were 196 schools plus the 23 that are charters. What percentage of schools are reporting proficiency for the whole school that's 20% or less? Meaning 80% of the kids cannot perform on grade level. Isn't that the coolest thing? I just think this is so neat how you can do this kind of engagement. Excellent. Great guesses. 25%, about 25%. And here they are. So you have a charter school here and a charter school here. You've got one school in Apo. You've got a total of 5 in Brandywine. The charter school of Newcastle. In Capital School District, you've got 6. And you can see it's broken down by math or ELA. Right? So this is concerning. It's a quarter of the schools. And there aren't that many. And if every school had, let's just say, every school has 300 students as an average number. That's 15,000 students. That's a lot of lives. Okay, now where do Delaware schools rank nationally? Great. We are in the bottom 5%, and I'm going to show you that the assessment's called NAEP, the National Assessment of Education Progress. So there's 2, for each of the next 2 slides, you're going to see a left and a right, math and reading. This is grade 4. They're scored with scaled scores. So these numbers, every state gets one of these numbers based on the scoring of the tests of the students who took it. Okay, so we're at 226 in math for grade 4 and 208. So this is the inverse of what we're seeing with our own state scores, right? Because remember, at the state scores, it was 4 out of 10 that could do reading and 3 out of 10 that could do the math. Here we've got the opposite at grade 4. At grade 8, we're going up, and we've still got the same trend. We're doing better in math than we are in reading. But where does that put us nationally? This is grade 4, from the bottom, with the rank going from the bottom to the top. So grade 4 reading, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 states that do worse than us. And in math, there are 3 states that do worse than us. And the same is true. It's a little bit better by 8th grade. But we're still in the bottom 5%. Okay, this is an open-ended. What do you think we can do? So that was the landscape. What can be done? Do you have the option to type a word?
Yeah, the option comes up.
Okay. So like, is it policy? Is it money? What is it? Is it activism? What is it? What do we think it is? Different curriculum, teacher training, equity. Back to basics, intervention, family engagement. To future careers, right? Linking it, making it relevant. Yeah, I think we would agree with all of that. We think that, and again, like I said earlier, there's no silver bullet. There's no one solution. It is all of these things. And these are all things that we can work on. These are things that we can do together. And the answers really, I think this is the beautiful part of this presentation. The answers to what has to happen are within each of us. It's just how we mobilize that and what we do with it. And I think all of this, the spirit, I hope that you hear me from a voice of saying we've got to be concerned for the children. I'm not blaming anyone who's part of the system. This isn't to throw anybody under the bus. Leading a school district is incredibly difficult. Being a school board member is difficult. Being an educator is difficult. Families are doing their best. This isn't anyone's fault, but it's our collective challenge. So what can you do? There are a few levers for change. So one thing is your district leadership, which is your superintendent or your school board. The second is the accountability structures. What interim indicators are we getting of how children are doing? What's the policy at the state and local level? How are resources being used? And making sure that we're addressing the conditions of teaching and learning. So at the district leadership, you can talk to your superintendent. Make a meeting, call up, have a group of you go. Have a breakfast meeting, ask to go and, and have like like there's 15 people and you want to have like, not like a town hall, but like I don't know, like a community meeting, not the board meeting, but you want to engage with the superintendent. Same thing with the school board. Meet your school board members, go to the school board meeting, send them letters, organize your voices as community members, and then present a position or proposal to them. And make sure you know who you're electing to be in those seats. The accountability structures. So you've got to understand the testing. You've got to understand how's Delaware measuring it, right? What are the state tests? What are they aligned to? How are they aligned to the national tests? What other indicators should there be? Are we looking just at proficiency? Are we looking at growth? Is there some other indicator that a child is doing well? Is there something related to vocational readiness? Is there something related to college readiness? Is there something related to emotional well-being? And then accountability models. How is Delaware rating and ranking their schools? What are the consequences for any school where children are not, consequences meaning something happened and we need to do an intervention, right? It doesn't have to be negative. Consequence sort of has a negative connotation, but really it's the corresponding response to an observed condition or an action. So what are we going to do to hold people accountable so that we can provide the supports and not ask them to solve this problem by themselves? For your state and local policies, like we looked at, contact your legislator, contact your school board. What policies are on the books? What policies do you think should be there? Join advocacy groups, engage us, reach out to me afterwards, sign up, social media. There are tons of organizations that are really trying to do something better for children in Delaware. So anyone that you join would be great, and rally your community. Go, please tell someone about this presentation today, and find a way to engage someone else so that there are more of us, because with more of us, the more we'll be able to get done. Resource allocation. So this is about the whole funding formula thing, and this is coming up. So I think it's really incumbent upon us to learn about how is the money allocated? What is the revenue? What is the revenue that's coming in? How is it being used now? What is it being spent on? Are the things we're buying now having the effect that we want? Is there a return on that investment? When more money, should more money come in? If more money comes in, what trade-offs need to be made? How do we balance concepts like equity and make sure that every child is getting what they need and what they deserve? I think you can do research on other models, like Tennessee just passed their weighted student funding formula. And I think too, if this comes to legislation, reaching out to your legislator and say, like, what's your position on this? Do you think there should be more funding? If yes, more funding, how much more funding? And then where is that more funding going to come from? And then finally, the conditions of teaching and learning. So visit schools. There are a lot of programs like Principal for a Day, and there are other mentor programs. The host program, I think it's called, where you're invited to come into the school, and you can find a way to be a part of that community. Just because you don't have school-age children or your children don't attend that school doesn't mean that there's not a place for you, and that there wouldn't be open and willing and receptive to the contribution you'd want to make. And then talk about the conditions of teaching and learning, of what you've seen and what you think children need. So advocate for more support for teachers. So I know I ran through this pretty quickly, but hopefully, I mean, there's no recipe, right? It's what you want to do. It's any movement, it's any contribution in this direction of change. So in this next slide, I know participation is hard. I hope that this has been interesting and engaging, and I haven't bored you to tears. But in this next slide, just like in the first one, I would really appreciate hearing back from you, because I think it's probably one of the most important questions in the presentation. Which one can you help with? So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for being here today, for caring about the issue, and for now letting me see that there are 14 more people who are ready to pick up the work and go forward. And it's that sense of solidarity, it's a sense of mission, it's a sense of unity. It's such a big problem that it could feel overwhelming for one person to know, what do I do, where do I start? But when there's a group of us, when there are people, we can help each other, we can support each other, we can listen to each other, we can show up for each other. And I think that's the change. And it won't change the outcome tomorrow, but it puts us on the right path, and it puts us on a different path, and everyone teach one, and then the next thing you know, we've got a mass mobilization of citizens across Delaware who really are positioned to demand that the system responds and does something different. So thank you. Okay, so school boards, the election's coming up, right? Very important. School boards play an important role in our community. Just tell me real quick, what district do you live in? So you may know this, but the more people saying the same answer, the bigger the word gets. That's how we can read into the counts. Great. So we've got we've got representation from everybody. We don't have APO, but we've got representation from everyone else, and Caesar Rodney. So school boards set policy. They evaluate the superintendent and they set policy. So the vision, the guardrails for that district, what they're supposed to accomplish with the resources that they have, managing the finances, communicating with the community about those decisions, and then advocating for change, for more responsive policy. That's what a school board, it's an incredibly important set of responsibilities. And there are a lot of seats that are up this year. 22, I think, total. So these are where your elections will be. And here's what normally voter participation looks like. It's less than 10%. So for something that's so critical, that we've all agreed is so critical, the fact that the turnout or the citizens' role in decision-making has been so marginalized that 90% of the people aren't choosing to participate in that important conversation is troubling. And there could be a lot of reasons for that, because it's an unpaid position. People are busy. People may think that, and then you're in a public position and then you're under attack. People are unhappy with you, right? There's a lot of reasons, but I think there's a world where we're trying to do this work together. And we're really looking at who's the best candidate, who's the candidate that we think can be successful, and we're getting behind them and we're supporting them. And then they'll be able to do the things like make the policy, manage the finances, evaluate the superintendent in ways that's driving at the local level the change we need to make sure that those schools are doing well, so that overall achievement in Delaware increases. So 10 things you can do. This is my last slide. Thank you for hanging in there with me. I really appreciate it. The first thing is just join the conversation. Just reach out to us, sign up for our newsletter. I'm happy to meet with you if you'd like to do that. You can join, or you can build a coalition. You just find like-minded people who care about the same thing, and try to build a bridge and set an agenda for, okay, we're not going to fix all of it, but what we want to do, we want to make sure that, every teacher has the opportunity for resource materials to be available for their children, or every child is going to be able in the summer to have something to go home with. Whatever you think would be helpful, talk to other people about it, and then you build a coalition around that. Consider running for the board. Right now it's too late for this year, but you could try in 25. Join our advocacy and lobbying efforts, right? So when there's an issue that that organizations are advocating for, education organizations are advocating for, sign up, sign the letter, show up in Dover, mobilize and activate others. So again, this is going back to your communities and figure out, if every person on this webinar got one person to get involved, instead of having 25 people, we would have 50. Build cross-sector alignment. So this is going to allow you to work from whatever lane you're in, whether you're in finance, or you're in public service, or you're in communications, or you're in business, or you're in the nonprofit sector. We want to work across sectors. So, and even industries to figure out how to get a diverse, broad-based cross-section of people to participate. You can volunteer or donate, spread the word, contact elected officials, and vote. Definitely vote. So, last question. Which of them will you try? Fantastic. Thank you. I mean, we ended somewhere very different than where we started. So again, I want to thank you for your time. You took time out of your workday to do this, to listen, to reflect, to consider where you can add value. And again, I reiterate my willingness and interest in hearing from you and learning from you. I'm happy to answer questions. We just launched a poll. So if you could quickly respond to that so that I could get a little bit of feedback, that would be great. And then Danielle, I don't know while they're, you want to, maybe we can open it up for questions too while they're completing the poll.
Yeah, did anyone have any questions that they wanted to submit through the Q&A, or did they want to chat with us after the webinar portion ends, then we can catch up then?
Sure, whatever works for you. But I want to thank everyone for their time and their commitment to the issue.
It looks like we've got some people finishing the poll. Perfect. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. We are really excited to have First Day Educate join us and speak on this important topic that we don't often get to speak about at the Newcastle County Chamber. So we were very pleased when they reached out so we could work on something like this together and get our community involved. Again, copy of this presentation will be sent out. Even if you were here today, it'll still be sent out to you, and then it'll be sent out to those that were just registered, what were unable to make it today. And thank you again for everyone for the positive feedback. I love this presentation. Julia, you did an amazing job. So
my email's on the screen, so if anyone wants to reach out, please feel free. I'll put it in the chat too. Mhm. So, Danielle, should we hang out and see if there's more questions or? should we-
I was waiting for some to pop up
Okay.
in Q&A, and then if anyone had any more
Uh-huh.
answers for the poll, but I think we're good. If we
I
just
think,
want to go ahead and close out.
Deanna, did you have a, question? I just saw your hand, but I'm not sure. And then I don't know if you'd be on mute or not.
Oh, there we go. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Deanna.
So I'm at Golden Beacon College, and I just attended yesterday the Delaware Pathways
Mhm.
conference that was in Dover. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. Helen is great.
And so they touted over and over again